Empathy is defined as the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. This show is a medium for learning about empathy through conversations. Welcome to Empathy Speak with Arvind Venugopal. Tune in every Friday as I chat with people from around the world about diverse and heartfelt journeys. Each episode will feature world music clips by creative partners at Twameva Music. Sign up at empathyspeak.com for more details. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Empathy Speak with Arvind Venugopal, where we speak about various things with guests and learn more about empathy through conversations and stories. Today, we're going to talk to Kari O'Driscoll, who started the Self Project. Let me tell you something about Kari, but let's welcome Kari first. Hey, Kari, nice to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Kari O'Driscoll is a writer, parent of 2 young adults, and the founder of the Self Project. The Self Project encourages teen-led discussions to foster self-awareness, critical thinking, and community communication amongst adolescents. Utilizing the latest research in psychology, mindfulness, nonviolent communication, and social emotional skills that are often absent in schools, we are changing the way teens think about themselves and relate to others. We offer easy-to-implement curriculum, books, workshops, and training to educators, therapists, and parents. She is the author of 3 books, most recently her memoir, Truth Has a Different Shape, and her work has appeared online and in print anthologies on parenting, social justice, reproductive rights, and cancer. You can find her at her websites, Kari O'Driscoll Writer, KARIODRISCOLL writer.com or theselfproject.com. We will make sure to add these links in the description of the episode. Wow, I am so impressed with your bio, and I wish I had a project like this to look up to when I was an adolescent myself. So welcome to the show, Kari.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I know you have been doing a lot of wonderful things. Would you like to share something about a moment where you found your inspiration to do this work?
Sure. I think it was when my own children, I have 2 children, 2 daughters. They're 18 and 20 years old now, but when they hit those sort of middle school years, and I'd always been a pretty involved parent, and I started to see what I thought was missing in this school. And their school was really fabulous, but there was something about the way that they weren't taught to how to be comfortable in their own skin, how they weren't taught to develop that self-awareness and that mindfulness around the emotions that they were having and then the behaviors that elicited. And I had done a lot of work in nonviolent communication and spent a lot of time on mindfulness for myself as a way to combat anxiety and depression. And it occurred to me that those tools that I had learned would be really, really valuable in a sort of relational setting for middle schoolers so that they could all learn those things together and build stronger, more resilient communities and relationships instead of this sort of passive aggressive, I'm going to get emotional and upset and I'm going to pretend that I'm not, or I'm going to blow things out of proportion, or, that sort of what a lot of people call drama that happens in middle school. And that's really what spurred me to do that kind of work. I also had worked for the Washington State Mental Health Division in their children's inpatient psychiatric programs for a few years. And I saw how kids who developed unhealthy ways of coping with stress and anxiety and even just everyday strong emotions, I saw how that was affecting them. And so I used that background as well to really kind of start doing this work.
That's inspirational. I almost feel like we need something like this in every part of the country. And it's definitely great to hear about your work. Why do you think it is so important that we work on developing this healthy sense of identity as a way to be part of a strong community?
I mean, I think it's really important because our culture, this Western culture, we talk so much about independence, like that's sort of the holy grail of growing up. But if we don't recognize two really important things, then we're doing our youth a disservice when we say to them, like, this is the goal, that you become independent, right? And the two things I think we need to recognize are, number one, it's their job when they're that age to play and try on lots of different identities. And often that's challenging. That feels challenging to parents, right? If my kid is trying on an identity that's very different, maybe culturally from the way that I grew up or values wise from the things that I thought that I'd taught them, that causes a lot of conflict. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's important to understand is that everything is relational. Right. You cannot be, there's no such thing as a fully independent human being. There just isn't. You can't do it.
It's fascinating, like what you mentioned, that everything is relational. There are two aspects to it, right? One is like the relational aspect of it on like the empathy aspect of it, basically. And then like how the word everything kind of makes me feel how empathy can sometimes feel overwhelming. Would you like to talk about how it can feel overwhelming at times and how to manage it?
Sure. I think a lot of times we talk about empathy as something that people are supposed to just automatically know how to feel. And for a lot of people, those emotions, those sensations are really physically overwhelming, right? I mean, I was that kid who couldn't read Where the Red Fern Grows without sobbing every time I even thought about that dog dying. I mean, it just, I felt it viscerally. And I think a lot of times what we do with empathy as human beings is we instantly connect the dots from, I feel a certain way, and so that means I have to do something about it. Right, I have to fix this, or I have to ignore it, or I have to stuff it, or,
Right.
And so I think that's helping kids understand that it's possible to have empathy and that it's okay to feel really overwhelmed by that, and that it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do something about it.
It's almost like a sense of realizing that the systems are actually broken and like trying to use it as a tool to see what we can do. And maybe even relationships, if you think about it, maybe you can share about why relationships are antidotes to these broken systems.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we've created lots of systems that are really good at centering themselves. When you hear, how could we ever, implement that solution because it's too expensive or it's too complicated, and plug that into anything, the school system, the healthcare system, the system of how we house people in this country, like all of those systems, right? As soon as we start saying it's too expensive, it's too complicated, we don't know how to do that, it's going to cause too much upheaval. That's the system centering itself. But relationships center the humans, right? And so relationship is the antidote to the broken systems. And I've seen it a lot actually during the last 6 months of this pandemic with the mutual aid groups that are popping up all over, right? It's not about getting a tax break. It's not about helping somebody fill out the forms to go get food aid or housing. It's not about finding an attorney to keep them from getting evicted. It's about who can pitch in $5 right now for this person because they need to get food and diapers for their kids. And it's astonishing what happens when you see.
It's almost like building strength in the community, right?
Yeah. And so that's what's happening is we're like disregarding the systems. We're saying, yep, that system's broken. And we've decided what's important is filling this human need. And so we're going to create relationships where we can fill that need.
Right.
And the system's just going to go do its thing.
Yeah, for people especially to look at these ways of connecting with the community, how would you think people could begin looking at empathy as like a step, creating stronger ties, especially to their community, their own communities?
Yeah, I think one of the most important and also the most difficult things that we have to do is to be able to sit with the discomfort of empathy. You know, we need to be able to see someone who's unhoused and stop and be mindful of what that brings up for us. You know, we need to be able to see our child who's throwing a massive tantrum over there in the corner because this online schooling thing is totally messing with their head. And instead of like imposing law and order or instantly, you know, jumping, we need to be able to sit with that discomfort. Wow, it hurts me when my kid is really upset. That stresses me out.
You touched on a really interesting topic that I want to dig a little bit more deeper into. We are currently speaking with Kari O'Driscoll, and this is Empathy Speak with Arvind Venugopal. Hang tight, we'll be right back and ask Kari more questions. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or phone. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome back to Empathy Speak with Arvind Venugopal. We are speaking with Kari O'Driscoll, a writer, parent of 2 young adults, and the founder of the Self Project. Kari, you touched upon something which really struck my interest a lot, because you spoke about the discomfort of a situation where we can apply the empathy and learn from that experience in order for that to happen, to allow ourselves to be in that discomfort and then learn from it. Would you like to touch upon that topic a little bit more and tell us a little bit more on how the listeners can basically do that in their own lives?
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, over time you can build up a tolerance for it. We, again, in our culture, we're sort of taught that there are some acceptable emotions and then unacceptable emotions. Like, you can be joyful, you can be happy, you can be angry, mostly if you're male, but sometimes if you're a woman, you can have justifiable anger. But sadness, especially for men and boys, is sort of shunned. That's not okay. And I think empathy is one of those things that for a lot of people is seen as a weakness. And it does bring up uncomfortable emotions for us. It is painful to see someone else suffering, but I think normalizing the fact that that's uncomfortable and painful is really, really important, because number one, it's not going to kill us. right? It won't completely destroy you, but we're so adept at finding ways to avoid feeling those feelings. You know, some people shop, some people sleep, some people drink alcohol, some people, you know, there's all these different ways that we find to avoid being discomfort, to feeling that discomfort. But I think if we normalize that, and we also normalize the idea that it doesn't necessarily mean that we're responsible for the outcome, we don't have to fix it, then what that enables us to do is stretch to the point where we can actually make a connection with that person that is suffering. If we don't feel like we're responsible for fixing their situation or convincing them that it's not that bad, then we can just be with them. And sometimes when you're suffering, that's really all you want, is for somebody to just acknowledge that things are really hard right now, and they're just going to kind of sit there with you.
Right, right. And in fact, I also feel like, if you look at a whole bunch of people, it might even be more challenging. And one of your books, I was seeing that you have a book called One Teenager at a Time. It's like it's really a fascinating concept how we can make a change in this world just by having an influence, a positive influence and an impact over one person, especially younger folks. Would you like to share anything about that book, and also maybe share with the listeners if folks want to check out your other books and your other contents, where they can go to as well?
Yeah, sure. All the books can be found on the Kari O'Driscoll writer.com website. One Teenager at a Time and my other book called The Self Project for Parents can both also be found on the website for the Self Project. But they can also be, like, you can order the books from anywhere online, IndieBound or, bookshop.org, or your local bookstore can get them. One Teenager at a Time is really my attempt at sort of a comprehensive curriculum around mindfulness, nonviolent communication, and social emotional health and well-being for teenagers or adolescents, which really is like 5th grade to sophomore in college, really, because it's rooted in what we know about adolescent brain development and social emotional development. So there's a whole range of discussion prompts in there and activities, and then there are guided meditations that go along with each of the discussion prompts and activities as well. And they range from, working on a positive mindset to compassion and empathy to dealing with stress, anxiety, and fear. There's an entire chapter with multiple activities and discussions around mindfulness and what that means and how do you develop that for yourself. And then the Self Project for Parents is really sort of a parallel curriculum for parents or caregivers of adolescents to help them kind of understand, how do we maintain strong, mindful connections with these young people and help them develop the kinds of skills and thought patterns and behavior patterns that are really going to send them out into the world feeling secure and connected and capable of creating community wherever they are.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I actually was going to touch upon your guided meditations as well. I looked at it on your website. That's an amazing thing to have as part of your curriculum and practice. We are hearing more and more of this in the recent times, and I hope your good work continues. If folks want to follow, your ongoing adventures, I know they can go check out your books on your website. If you are, I know whenever the COVID times end, talking about the current times that we are in, if folks want to follow your journey, are you also on social media that folks can follow you on?
Yes, yeah, and you can find all that on my website as well. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And anything I do on there, any podcasts or events or book readings or anything, that's all going to be on my website.
That's great.
There's an option to sign up at, I think, the very bottom of the homepage to get notifications. So if people want to just send their email, then anytime I write a new blog post or I have a new event or I'm traveling somewhere,
That's
that
great.
an email
That's
will
great.
go out to folks.
For some of the listeners who are tuning in, they may or may not realize when you mentioned Washington that you're actually located on the West Coast versus me near Washington, D.C., which is on the East Coast of the U.S. So nowadays there's a lot of news coming around from the West Coast with everything that's happening. How are you doing out there, and how is it looking out there?
It's pretty awful. It's pretty terrible. We've had smoke choking the skies for, I think we're on day 6 now, to the point where you can't go outside. It's unsafe to be outside. And it feels pretty oppressive. And it's kind of scary. I mean, people always laugh. I live in Seattle, and it's, known for its rain. And it rained last night, and all it did was just make it more humid and push the smoke into a more dense cloud. So, I personally have family members in California and Oregon who've lost everything to the wildfires in the last week. And and it's pretty scary. It's pretty, this is the 3rd year in the last 4 years that we've had smoke so bad that you can't go outside of your house.
Wow. That's I hope everything slowly shifts back to a reasonable and manageable level, and I hope things resume soon. Before we end this podcast, would you have any message for our listeners that they can take away for the week?
I think one thing that I've found that's just really incredibly powerful, even if you don't do anything about it, if you just are a witness to it, is if you're on social media, start seeking out mutual aid, just hashtag mutual aid or hashtag community care. It gives me goosebumps to see what's happening all over the world, really, where people are putting out a call for, help in one area, and other people are just stepping up like crazy. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm late to the game. I know community care and mutual aid has been happening in communities of color, especially for decades. But just since COVID, it's been pretty awesome to see people stepping up and getting really organized around helping other people.
Almost like people starting to realize that we are one humanity and the world is like a shared world, and we need to be there for each other more as we move forward in these times. Thank you so much, Kari, for speaking with me this evening, and wishing you all the best for your journeys ahead.
Thank you. You as well. Thank you for doing this podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. Sign up on our website empathyspeak.com for more details and to stay connected. Follow us on social media. Thanks to our creative partners Swameva Music. This is Arvind Venugopal signing off. See you next week.